Hello there. As an astrophysicist who has spent over 3 decades staring into the dark, I can tell you this. The universe every now and then throws us a curveball. We've all seen Oumuamua, the first confirmed object from another stellar system, and it fundamentally challenged our tidy definitions. But Atlas, this thing is a whole different ballgame. The anomaly in our community, Atlas was initially classified as an interstellar comet, a rare visitor to be sure, but one we thought we understood. However, as it made its perihelion pass its closest approach to the sun, all our models began to fall apart. The data is irrefutable, and it has us baffled. First, the tail. Where is it? At that proximity to the sun, the radiation pressure should have been sublimating its surface ices, creating a massive, highly visible tail of gas and dust. Yet the latest images show only a dense, compact nucleus. It isn't outgassing. Second, and this is the part that's keeping me awake at night, the non-gravitational acceleration. Simply put, Atlas is speeding up. It's being pushed. That thrust isn't coming from the sun's gravity, nor is it coming from melting ice, because again, no tail. It is being propelled by something. The precision astrometry data shows a subtle lateral drift that standard comet physics simply cannot account for. As a scientist, I'm trained to look for natural explanations. Could it be outgassing? We just can't see. Solar radiation pressure? But the numbers don't add up. The force is too strong, too consistent. It's behaving almost like a low thrust engine. But the thing that really worries me isn't the physics, it's the people. Behind the dry academic papers, another storm is brewing. Space agencies are suddenly shifting high-level personnel. My colleagues, top data analysts, are abruptly furloughed or reassigned. There are whispers of high-resolution images being intentionally withheld images that might show us the precise shape of Atlas. Why the cover-up over a space rock? Unless it isn't a rock. And then on November 4th, 2025, the silence was broken not by NASA, not by the ESA, but from a source none of us could have possibly anticipated. President Donald Trump, on his Truth Social platform, posted an announcement that left our scientific community staggering. He announced, "We are standing on the threshold of something far larger than any of us can imagine. The astrophysical data is contradicting reality, and the halls of power are acting strangely. This is no longer a simple physics problem, it has become a global mystery." If you want to join me in peeling back the layers of truth behind Atlas, the truth that some people seem desperate to hide, hit that like and subscribe button, because the universe's biggest secrets aren't always found in textbooks. Sometimes we have to hunt them down ourselves. The power play and the Martian eye, President Trump's announcement on November 4th, wasn't just a shock. For those of us tracking Atlas, it felt like a deliberate move. Sean Duffy was out. The official cause? An ill-advised tweet aimed at Kim Kardashian. It was ridiculous. In our community, no one bought it. It was a diversion. Duffy, despite being a politician, seemed to be following scientific protocols, slow and bureaucratic. Yes, but he was following them. And the replacement, Jared Isaacman. This was a strategic move. Isaacman isn't a government bureaucrat. He's a billionaire, a veteran pilot, and a civilian astronaut who has commanded his own missions. He's an outsider, a decider, and someone with deep ties to the private space industry. The question circulating among us was this: did Trump bring in Isaacman to cover up the truth about Atlas more effectively, or did he bring in a disruptor because Trump himself believed Duffy's bureaucracy was hiding data from him? While we were all busy speculating, another factor came into play. The US government shut down, suspiciously convenient, right when we needed the most critical images, the high resolution post-perihelion shots that could confirm its lack of a tail and its bizarre acceleration, the official data channels froze. Our telescopes and orbiters were technically still collecting, but the data was getting stuck in a bureaucratic logjam. We were blinded, and then, while Washington was gridlocked, Beijing made its move. Our unlikely savior, the China National Space Administration, CNSA, they broke the silence. They weren't playing political games, they just released the science. This wasn't speculation, this was hard fact. On October 3rd, 2025, and this is crucial, this was before Atlas made its perihelion past their Tianwen-1 orbiter, circling Mars, swiveled its cameras. From a distance of 28.96 million kilometers, Tianwen-1 used its high-resolution imaging camera, HIRIC. We call it HIRIC. This is an incredibly sophisticated piece of hardware. At that range, it wasn't just seeing a bright dot, it could resolve features. The entire astronomical community held its collective breath downloading those image files, while the US was hiding whatever it saw after Atlas grazed the sun. China had just shown us what it looked like before the encounter. We opened those images, and what we saw, it changed everything. It was not the compact, inert object that the later leaked US data would hint at. What Tianwen-1 saw was the before photo and the political veil. When the Tianwen-1 images were published, we didn't just download them, we devoured them. Yes, the HIRIC camera, with its 38.7 centimeters mirror, had a slightly lower resolution than the American HiRISE camera, 50 centimeters, that was currently locked down. But it didn't matter. It was enough, and it showed exactly what all of us had expected. On October 3rd, 2025, Atlas looked like a comet. The CNSA data was unequivocal. They didn't just capture the nucleus, they captured the distinct coma, a gaseous shell surrounding it, fanned out for thousands of kilometers. They even released a beautiful animation, 30 frames, showing the object moving against the Martian star field. At that time, Atlas was active. It was outgassing ice as it approached the sun, just like any other comet. But this created an agonizing paradox. Let's assemble the facts like an investigator. Chinese data, pre-perihelion, Oct. 3rd. Atlas has a large coma. It is releasing gas. This is perfectly normal and explains its non-gravitational acceleration. The escaping gas acts as a small thruster. US data, post-perihelion from part 1. The leaked, unconfirmed images show no coma, just a dense, compact nucleus. US data, post-perihelion from part 1. Measurements still show Atlas is accelerating even more powerfully, but with no tail and no coma to account for the thrust. This is physically impossible. A comet cannot shut off its coma like a light switch, and it certainly cannot stop outgassing while simultaneously increasing its acceleration. You cannot simultaneously kill the rocket engine, the tail, and go faster unless you've switched to a different kind of engine. And then the political intervention began. A US congresswoman, in an apparent attempt to placate the public, took to social media. She talked about her wonderful conversation with NASA. She blamed the bureaucratic red tape of the government shutdown. But then she said a line that made me sit up. Dr. Avi Loeb from Harvard was correct in his initial analysis of the anomalous tail. NASA has observed this as well. I, Avi Loeb, the person telling you this story, nearly dropped my tablet. They're using my name, my work on Oumuamua to normalize this. They're trying to spin this. See? It's just an anomalous tail. We've seen it. Dr. Loeb talks about weird tails. Nothing to see here. But they are deliberately missing the entire point. The issue isn't that Atlas had an anomalous tail. The issue is that the tail vanished the moment it passed the sun, just as a mysterious, invisible propulsion kicked in. that congresswoman is running damage control. She's confirming the before data, the tail, to make us forget the after data, no tail, inexplicable acceleration. Right now, all eyes are on those high-rise images. The US government is sitting on the after photo, the one that would show how Atlas changed as it slingshotted around the Sunday. The Chinese showed us the caterpillar. The Americans are hiding the picture of whatever just emerged from the chrysalis. The numbers don't lie. Let's break down her words from my perspective. She said, NASA confirmed my initial analysis of the anomalous tail. This is a masterful smokescreen. They are validating the Chinese data, the before data, to make the public believe everything is under control. But what's truly explosive are her next two hints. First, this will be one of many interstellar objects. And why say that? In my entire career, we have officially confirmed two interstellar objects, Oumuamua and Borisov, and now Atlas. Her saying one of many implies the agencies are tracking a deluge of anomalies that they are not sharing with the scientific community. We are being kept out of the loop. Second, critical data is being held up. She blames bureaucracy. I'm not buying it. In astrophysics, when you find something civilization altering, you don't wait for a form to get stamped. You shout it from the rooftops. Unless you've been ordered to stay quiet, politicians can lie, the numbers cannot. While Washington was gridlocked, independent groups and a few internal leaks reran the orbital models. The new data, the post-perihelion data NASA is still hiding, showed two things that, as a physicist, make the hair on my neck stand up. One, the lateral displacement. This is the stunner. Imagine Atlas is flying on a railroad track. The sun's gravity is what keeps it on that track. If it outgasses, like a comet, it gets pushed forward or jitters a bit, but Atlas didn't. It moved sideways. The models showed a distinct left-right shift relative to its predicted orbit, but it had almost zero up-down vertical displacement. In physics, this is profoundly bizarre. A natural force, like a gas vent, would be chaotic. It would push the object around in all directions, but a force that only pushes laterally while perfectly maintaining its orbital altitude, that is not a random drift. That is a controlled pattern. That is navigation. That is a spatial strafe. Two, the persistent non-gravitational acceleration. This is the final piece. As we established, the tail, the coma, vanished after the solar pass. Theoretically, the thrust should have gone to zero. It didn't. The acceleration signal was still there. It was still pushing Atlas along. The new numbers showed the thrust had decreased. It was now only about 1/3 of the original value we measured when the tail was active. Let's put these two facts together. The object turned off its dirty propulsion system, the comet tail, as it cleared the Sunday. It immediately turned on a clean, invisible propulsion system at 1/3 power. This new propulsion system is capable of deliberate steering, executing precise lateral shifts. As a scientist, I must follow the evidence. And the evidence is pointing toward an unthinkable conclusion. We are not looking at a rock, we are looking at a machine. And despite dropping to 1/3, that thrust still maintained significant statistical confidence. It wasn't signal noise, it was real. It is still pushing the 5 billion ton paradox. When we, as astrophysicists, talk about orbits, we use parameters to describe the forces. Gravity is the default. Anything else, any propulsion we call a non-gravitational acceleration component, designated A1, A2, and A3. The new leaked data confirms precisely what we suspected from the earlier models, A1 and A2 in plane. These values are positive. This means there are forces at work pushing the object forward and sideways within its orbital plane. This is its steering and thrust. A 3, a perpendicular, this value is essentially 0. This is the key. Imagine a hockey puck on the ice. A 1 and a 2 are forces pushing it left, right, or forward. A 3 is the force trying to lift it off the ice. The fact that A3 is 0 means that whatever force is pushing Atlas, it is perfectly controlled. It is not a chaotic gas vent spraying material in all directions. It is a stunningly precise directional thrust acting only radially and transversely. But this right here leads us to the 5 billion ton paradox. In comet physics, there is only one standard explanation for non-gravitational acceleration: the rocket effect. It's simple. The sun hits the comet. Ice sublimates into gas and dust, jetting outward per Newton's third law, conservation of momentum. Ejecting that mass out the back propels the comet forward. We can calculate this. We take the A1 divided by A2 acceleration we measured and plug in the typical exhaust velocity for a comet around a few hundred meters per second. When we ran the numbers, our hearts just stopped. To produce the thrust we observed, Atlas would have had to lose over 13% of its total mass during its perihelion pass. This isn't an abstract number. Based on its size estimates, this is equivalent to Atlas venting billions with a B of tons of material. An eruption event on this scale, let's call it 5 billion tons of gas and dust, would not be subtle. It would not be hidden. It would have produced the most spectacular coma and tail. It would have been one of the brightest, most visible comets ever recorded in human history. The entire night sky would have been dominated by it. So here is the paradox. We have two irrefutable facts. Fact A, from acceleration. Physics requires Atlas to have ejected 5 billion tons of material. Fact B, from post-perihelion images. Direct observation shows it ejected nothing. It has a dense, clean nucleus, no tail, no coma. An object cannot simultaneously be a 5 billion ton thruster and be invisible. This means our very foundation is wrong. Our assumption that the thrust is coming from mass ejection is wrong. Atlas is accelerating without an exhaust pipe. And in physics, there's only one thing that does that. Something we've theorized but never truly seen: propellantless thrust, like a solar sail or something. And then far more alien, the impossible fingerprint. Let's be clear, the reduction in acceleration down to 1/3 doesn't solve the 5 billion ton paradox. It just lessens the quantitative pressure. It means Atlas only needed to vent, say, 1.5 billion tons of material instead of 5 billion, but the qualitative problem remains. We are still seeing significant thrust, A1, A2, yet the post-perihelion images still show no commensurate cloud of gas and dust. That modest coma they mention, it is far too small, too faint to account for that much force. It's like seeing a battleship move with a single person blowing on its sails. The thrust and the exhaust do not match. But that's not the most frightening part. The most frightening part comes from the spectroscopy. This is when we analyze the reflected light from an object to see what it's made of. The preliminary results, they are impossible in the literal sense of the word. One, the nickel-iron paradox. In my 30 years studying meteorites and planetary cores, I know this. Nickel and iron always go together. They are siderophile, iron-loving elements forged side by side in the cores of dead stars. You find one, you find the other. The spectrum from Atlas shows a dominance of nickel, but an almost complete absence of iron. This does not exist in nature. You cannot find a space rock made of pure nickel. The only way you get refined nickel is through metallurgy. You have to process it, strip the iron out, refine it. Two, the industrial signature, the chemistry of this so-called comet is completely wrong. The carbon monoxide CO to water H2O ratio is astronomically high. Comets are dirty snowballs. They are defined by their water ice. This high CO ratio suggests it did not originate from the cold, pristine comet nurseries of deep space. The rare volatile compound. This is the smoking gun. Our analysis found signatures compatible with nickel tetracarbonyl, NiCO4. I have to pause here. Nickel tetracarbonyl is not something you find floating in space. It is a highly specific industrial byproduct. On Earth, we use it in the MON process, a method for refining raw nickel ore to 99.99% purity. Now, put it all together, we see an object made of refined nickel, no iron. We see the signature of the process used to refine nickel tetracarbonyl. We see a clean, persistent, unexplained thrust. A terrifying hypothesis begins to form. The thrust is the nickel tetracarbonyl. It's a highly volatile gas. Atlas isn't a comet venting water ice. It's an industrial machine venting propellant, a deliberate, clean, gas only, no dust propellant that perfectly explains the A1 divided by A2 acceleration without a messy cometary tail. And just when we thought it couldn't get any weirder, we looked at the optical polarimetry readings. The data showed extreme negative polarization values. This speaks to its surface. It's reflecting light in a way that the three final hypotheses, those polarimetry readings, what your data calls extreme negative polarization values, tell us about the surface texture of Atlas. A typical comet, essentially a dirty snowball, reflects light in a predictable way, but Atlas doesn't. These results suggest its surface is covered in large, highly porous, structurally complex particles. Think less of a solid rock and more like a radiator or a designed microstructure. It's unlike anything we've ever seen in our solar system. And so after weeks of frantic analysis, the scientific community working in the shadows as the official channels remain frozen has narrowed it down to three final hypotheses. These are the only options left on the table. One, the anomalous natural comet. This is the safe choice, the one most of my colleagues are clinging to. It posits that Atlas is a comet, just a freak one. To make it work, we have to bend the models. Maybe it vents gas in only one direction, like an engineered nozzle, instead of chaotically. Maybe it's ejecting invisible particles that we can't detect, but that still generate thrust. Or maybe it's venting gas at extremely high velocities, far greater than simple ice sublimation could ever produce. Basically, we have to keep adding complications to natural physics to try and make the data fit. It's a patch, and it's not a convincing one. Two, the non-thermal mechanism engine, this is the middle ground hypothesis. It directly addresses the 5 billion ton paradox. Remember, momentum equals mass times velocity, P equals mv. Our problem is that we see the momentum P, the thrust, but we don't see the mass velocity mv, the tail. But what if v velocity is just insanely high? This hypothesis suggests Atlas is ejecting mass, but at velocities thousands of times higher than thermal evaporation. This drastically reduces the mass loss requirement. You don't need 5 billion tons of material if you're ejecting 5 kilograms at near light speed. But this raises the obvious question. What in nature produces that kind of non-thermal propulsion? This isn't a comet anymore. It's an engine, whether it's a natural one, a miniature pulsar, or an artificial one. Three, the artificial probe or artifact, this is the hypothesis. No one wants to say out loud, but that everyone is thinking. It requires extraordinary proof. And we don't have it, not the clear photo, not the hello signal, but unlike the other hypothesis, it doesn't fight the data. It actually explains it. Artificial object explains the pure nickel composition and the industrial nickel tetracarbonyl signatures. Powered by an engine, explains the A1 divided by A2 acceleration without a tail. Intelligent navigation explains the lateral strafe maneuver, and the A3 zero control movement. Complex structure explains the bizarre polarimetry readings. Your data is correct. Despite being a priori, before evidence, impossible, we cannot discard this hypothesis. Science demands we test it. To clarify exactly why we are backed into this corner, let's start the official list of anomalies. Here are the 10 decisive anomalies of Atlas that no single comet model can explain all at once. A retrograde orbit. It's traveling against the rest of the solar system. This is rare, but a prearranged rendezvous with those three hypotheses, natural engine, artificial, on the table. Let's look at the new evidence. One, the retrograde orbit on the ecliptic plane. This is a statistical nightmare. Retrograde. This means it's flying against traffic, opposite to the spin of the planets. Rare, but possible. The ecliptic plane. This is the thin, almost 2D disk that all the planets, including Earth, orbit the sun on. A natural interstellar object arrives from another star. It should come from a random direction, from above, below, or any angle in the 360 degrees of space. The probability of a random object flying into our solar system and perfectly aligning with that thin plane by only a few degrees is astronomically low. The probability of it doing that while also flying retrograde is statistically near impossible. It's like firing an arrow from 100 kilometers away and having it fly perfectly through a moving hoop backwards. This doesn't look like a random chance. This looks like a deliberate orbital insertion. It was aiming for the solar system's highway. 2. The anti-tail, pointing at the sun. This violates basic physics. Comet physics 101 is straightforward. The sun radiates light and solar wind. This pressure pushes material, gas and dust away, forming a tail that always points away from the sunday. The images captured a jet, not a fuzzy tail, but a directed anti-tail of dust and gas pointing straight at the sunday. A natural object cannot do this. It's like a boat creating a wake in front of itself. You cannot overpower solar radiation pressure unless you have your own greater propulsion. That is not a tail. That is a braking engine. It was using thrust to fight the sun, likely to fine-tune its trajectory on approach 3. The mass and velocity anomaly. This reinforces what we saw in the chemical data, the nickel. Atlas is both unusually large and moving fast. This combination is rare because a large object, if made of ice and dust, like a typical comet, should have disintegrated or at least outgassed massively during its perihelion pass from the sheer stress and heat. It didn't. This means its material is more durable than simple ice. It has high tensile strength. It is made of something that can withstand extreme thermal and gravitational forces, like metal. 4. The synchronized planetary flyby chain. To me, this is the most alarming of all. Atlas's trajectory was not a simple, gentle curve. It performed a series of coordinated flybys of major planets. We call this gravity assists. This is the exact technique NASA, divided by JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, uses to steer our probes. We send Voyager past Jupiter to slingshot it towards Saturn. We use flybys for Juno to fine-tune its orbit. It's a cosmic ballet calculated to the precise second. Atlas performed this exact dance, and the most convenient part, this orbital chain, this dance, made direct observation from Earth incredibly difficult at the most critical moments. It used our planets for acceleration divided by deceleration and to hide itself. This isn't chance. This is orbital design. These first 4 anomalies alone all but eliminate hypothesis 1 natural comety. We are being forced into the territory of engines and deliberate intent. The industrial fingerprint and the wow signal 5 and 6. The impossible chemistry and structure confirmed. This list reconfirms what we saw in the spectroscopic and polarimetry data. It's not just unusual, it's unnatural. Chemistry anomaly 5, nickel dominance, no iron, high CO divided by water ratios. As I said, this is the fingerprint of industrial metallurgy. It wasn't formed in a pristine gas cloud, it was manufactured. Structure anomaly 6, extreme negative polarization. This confirms the surface is not rock or ice, but a complex porous structure, perhaps something designed to dissipate heat or a solar sail. Anyone still clinging to hypothesis one natural comet now has to explain how nature creates refined nickel and a complex microstructure. They cannot. But it's the next two anomalies that have made us rethink everything. The industrial fingerprint and the WOW signal 5 and 6. The impossible chemistry and structure confirmed. This list reconfirms what we saw in the spectroscopic and polarimetry data. It's not just unusual, it's unnatural. Chemistry, anomaly 5, nickel dominance, no iron, high CO divided by water ratios. As I said, this is the fingerprint of industrial metallurgy. It wasn't formed in a pristine gas cloud, it was manufactured. Structure, anomaly 6, extreme negative polarization. This confirms the surface is not rock or ice, but a complex porous structure, perhaps something designed to dissipate heat or a solar sail. Anyone still clinging to hypothesis, one natural comet, now has to explain how nature creates refined nickel and a complex microstructure. They cannot, but it's the next two anomalies that have made us rethink everything. 7, the point of origin. The WOW signal 1977, this is it. As a scientist, I'm trained to be skeptical of coincidences. But as a cosmologist, I know that some are just too big to ignore. In 1977, the Big Ear Radio Telescope detected a 72-second powerful narrowband signal coming from the constellation Sagittarius. It was so strong that astronomer Jerry Ehman circled it and wrote, "Wow," next to the printout. It never repeated. It is the strongest, most mysterious candidate for a SETI signal we have ever had. Now, consider this. When we map the trajectory of Atlas backward in time, it doesn't just come from a random direction, it comes from that exact patch of sky. This directional coincidence is exploding the internal forums. A skeptic will say, it's a coincidence, the sky is big but not infinite. A speculative scientist like me will ask, what is more probable? A statistical near impossibility, or that 50 years ago, we heard the doorbell, the WOW, signal, and Atlas is the visitor who just arrived? This elevates the narrative from strange object to potential contact. 8, the photometric evolution, the green flash. And this visitor is not quiet. It didn't just fly by, it changed. Observers noted a sudden, sharp increase in brightness, but it wasn't a simple flare. It was accompanied by an intense green emission, dramatically altering the object's color profile. Most critically, this event did not follow traditional thermal activity. In other words, it wasn't the sun heating up a pocket of ice. This was a discrete event. Something on Atlas activated. What are we seeing here? A course correction, like the antitail, a deliberate energy release, a systems failure, a coolant or fuel leak, something that glows green when excited. When you combine this green flash with the antitail pointing at the sun, you have the portrait of an object that is actively managing its trajectory and its state. Hypothesis 1 natural is effectively dead. We are left only with hypothesis 2 engine and hypothesis 3 artificial. And the line between those two is blurring fast. We are now facing an industrially processed object capable of self-propulsion that appears to have navigated to our solar system from a historically significant origin point and is now active. The final paradox and the hour of judgment. The last two anomalies on our 10-point list are no longer just oddities, they are direct challenges to fundamental physical law. 9. The acceleration divided by mass loss paradox confirmed This is the 5 billion ton paradox. The object is being pushed without an exhaust pipe, a fundamental physical contradiction. 10. Symmetrical ejection, no recoil. This is the final detail. Even when it did release material, like the green flash or the anti-tail, the object remained perfectly stable. It didn't wobble, tumble, or flinch. Understand what this means. Newton's third law is absolute. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If you fire a gas jet to the left, the object must recoil to the right. The fact that Atlas didn't recoil means it was actively counteracting that force. It implies precisely distributed impulses, in other words, stabilization thrusters. This is the very definition of engineering. A natural object is chaotic. This one is controlled. Now, step back. Look at the entire 10-point anomaly list. Hypothesis 1, the natural comet, is dead. To believe in it, you must now believe that nature, by sheer chance, created an object flying retrograde and perfectly aligned with our plane, a statistical impossibility, created a braking engine that points at the Sunday, forged it from pure industrial nickel, left the chemical traces of the process used to refine that nickel, gave it a complex, porous, structured surface, launched it from the exact origin point of the wow signal, equipped it with the ability to strafe laterally, 3 equals 0, and equipped it with the stabilization thrusters to cancel its own recoil. That is no longer science. That is fanaticism in a desperate attempt to cling to a natural explanation. Hypothesis 3, the artificial probe, is no longer the extraordinary claim. It is the only simplest hypothesis, per Occam's razor, that consistently explains all 10 data points. The decisive window, December 2025, and so here we are. November 2025, the US government is still shut down, but the international pressure, thanks to the Chinese data, is now overwhelming. And a global coalition of observatories, including NASA under Isaacman's new leadership, is spinning up. The political game is over. The physics is about to speak. We have a narrow window from late November through January, peaking around December 19th, 2025. This will be the final test. Here is what the entire scientific community is looking for, the coma cloud. Do we see a massive gas and dust cloud commensurate with that 13% mass loss? If yes, hypothesis 1 natural lives again. If no, it is buried. Definitive spectroscopy. Do we confirm the nickel tetracarbonyl? Does that CO divided by H2O ratio remain preposterous? This is the industrial fingerprint test. Non-thermal emissions. Will our radio and gamma ray telescopes detect gamma bursts or microwaves coming from Atlas? This would be the power signature, a reactor, an engine. The polarimetry map. Can we get a detailed map of that complex porous surface? Does it show repeating geometric patterns? Precision astrometry. Most importantly, can we catch it steering again? Can we see another A1 divided by A2 acceleration shift without an obvious cause? The combination of these 5 datasets will give us the answer. They will definitively separate a natural event, massive, chaotic, icy, from an artificial one, controlled, clean, chemically bizarre. As a scientist with 30 years in this field, I've spent my entire life searching for our place in the cosmos. We've always looked for the answer in the distant past, in theories and equations. For the first time, the answer might not be in the textbooks. It's out there, it's moving, and it's getting closer. December is going to change everything.